order. Here comes somebody.
Oh, you like that.
We have a quorum, but we have Leslie, didn't get it. Slowly. The, Town of Madera Climate Action Committee meeting for Wednesday, June 21st. And with that, we'll do roll call.
Member Wall,
Present here.
thank you. Committee member Simon,
Here.
committee member Foster. Here.
Yeah.
Committee member Alden.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Ruiz is absent today and Chair Johnson.
Here. Should do this, statute. I
Pledge allegiance.
pledge
Allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag
flag
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
of
one
the
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty.
and justice for all.
I apologize, I did not take my hat off. I intended to take my hat off.
We're never too late to talk.
Open time for public comment. I guess we have two people online.
We have two presenters on.
Oh,
We do not have any public comment, but I did just want to take a minute to recognize committee member Foster. And this is her last meeting on the committee, so just wanted to recognize and thank her for her service. And wish you the best of luck in.
Where are you going? Oh,
Where?
yes.
In Washington, so I'll be far away.
Where?
Georgetown.
Oh, cool.
Congratulations.
which department?
I hope to do study environment and sustainability there, so. that'll be fun.
Congratulations.
I helped them set up their university sustainability program. You'll have fun. They have a really good program. Yeah. And we'll miss you.
We will.
But how cool, how good for you.
So no other public comment. No other public comment.
Okay, so we'll move right on to the agenda. Could I get a motion to approve the already comment on the meeting minutes from our previous meeting?
Actually, I did have a comment. I forget what section it was, Phoebe, the one where we talked about approving the not allowing exceptions to the gas thing. And what I wanted to do was state in there that the reason we did that was because we determined that propane is a solution for the needs of all those folks that were, I was more articulate in the email I sent to you. But that was the, what I wanted to say was, we didn't just say, no, we're not going to do that, but we wanted to do that. I wanted to make sure that we said why we rejected that exception, and that's because propane was an acceptable alternative. That's all.
Yes, so Martin's proposing an amendment to the minutes in section 4A to add a comment noting that the reason that the committee didn't support any exemptions for the expansions of our electrification ordinance were because those needs could be met with a propane appliance if someone still wanted to have an outdoor gas appliance, for example.
Or generator, yeah.
Is there any discussion on that amendment?
No discussion on that amendment. I think that's wise. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up because we did make some decisions in our last meeting, but we may, in conversation later in this meeting, have some discussion about where the Ninth Circuit Court decision is with respect to Berkeley, and San Anselmo is moving forward in a way that protects them from adverse lawsuits that may crop up. So I do have some information about that.
Maybe the policy committee would be a good place to bring it up.
Yeah, but we haven't had a meeting, so,
Well, I think we can
okay.
wait a minute. Any other comment on the amendment? Could I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended?
I'll move.
Second,
I'll second.
all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Okay, unanimously approved. Thank you for that amendment, Martin.
Certainly.
Then we're business.
All right, so first on the agenda tonight, we have a presentation from the Transportation Authority of Marin. We have Derek McGill and Michaela Hyatt online to talk to us about their alternative fuels program. So are you all able to share screen?
Thank you for joining us.
I'll
Thanks
turn
so
it over
much.
to you, Derek.
Yeah, I'll give it a share screen try in a moment, but just wanted to introduce ourselves real quick. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Derek McGill. I'm the Director of Planning for the Transportation Authority of Marin. I've been with the agency since 2014 and have led a number of the efforts related to our alternative fuels program and sustainability efforts in general. And so I wanted to just give a presentation tonight on the overview of our programs that relate to the recent letter related to potential EV opportunities within the county, which I believe is next up on the agenda. Just provide some context of what we're seeing with our programs, and then that should segue into the next agenda item for tonight. Also on this meeting is Michaela Hyatt. She's our Associate Transportation Planner. And we'll be transitioning to the role of program manager for the alt fuels program in the coming weeks. And so we're both happy to answer any questions. But I wanted to run through a quick presentation, make sure we're all on the same page with some of the trends and what TAM offers our public agencies in the county. So hopefully this works. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah, that's great.
Great. Okay, just a little bit of background about TAM. We're the congestion management agency for the county. We have representation from all 5 county supervisors and then 1 representative from each city and town. We actually have a larger board than our staff. We only have 14 members of our staff and respond to a wide array of needs laid out in voter-approved expenditure plans starting in 2004 and then renewed in 2018, and a vehicle license fee that was passed in 2010. So our measure AA, which is our 2018 renewal of our initial measure, has 75% dedicated to reducing the reliance of single occupant vehicles and associated emissions from those vehicles. We fund our local transit services through Marin Transit. We also provide funding and manage the Safe Routes to Schools program. And then we have funding for maintenance of our local roads and infrastructure, including our bike paths. And we have a highway set aside for reducing congestion on Highway 101 and the associated roadways, including some interchange improvements that are in the planning stages currently, and will be moving forward. But what's unique about our measure compared to other counties is the heavy emphasis on our transit, senior transit services, and ongoing operations and management of our system. Most measure programs in the Bay Area and statewide are focused on capacity increasing projects on the highway system or transit systems. And that's a little bit different than what we do here in the county, where we're focused more on management of our system. We have funding for local roads that are required to provide complete streets funding. And then we also fund all of the crossing guards that are dispersed throughout the county at, I think, over 100 locations now in the county. The other major source of funding that we have, thanks to the voters of Marin County, is Measure B, which is our vehicle license fee. It's a $10 annual registration fee. And this has been in place really since 2011. And we have a small set aside within this program for programs that reduce congestion and pollution, and that includes crossing guards, opportunities to get people out of their vehicles through commute alternatives, and then the alternative fuel program. We've been basically working to install electric vehicle chargers and supporting the electrification of transportation since 2011. And this is a key strategy along with our transit, safe routes, and multimodal focus to reduce GHG emissions throughout the county. Our program's gone underneath a lot of updates since 2011, most notably in 2019, then again in 2020. And every year there continues to be a lot of discussion around how these funds are used and where these funds go in our budget for the following year. But our core program really focuses on public agency EV charging equipment and public agency fleet conversion. And we'll talk a little bit more about why we're focused on public agencies. And then we also have a category for outreach and technical assistance that is really geared towards driving more rebates within this space as well from our public agencies. So we are very fortunate in the county to have these funds. Basically, the way our program is designed is it matches on our EV charger program. We work closely with MCE, formerly Marin Clean Energy, and we provide together $6,500 per head for public agencies that are installing EV chargers that are deep green. Their funds are not limited to any specific cost of a project. So if you're doing, let's say, a town hall or a civic center replacement, like the Corte Madera has been working on for a number of years, these $6,500 per head charger rebates can be applied to any cost associated with the installation of chargers. The breakdown is really $3,000 from our Measure B program and then $3,500 from MCE. They're among the highest rebates of any public agency in the state. I think $3,500 tops the list out of all agencies in the state, to be honest, but I haven't checked in a while. We also offer EV fleet rebate, and that's been designed to match the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, which is increasingly problematic for how we structure this program and subject to future changes in the program. But we have ventured away from that CVRP linkage to include e-bikes, utility carts in the fleet rebates. So public agencies that have internal combustion engine vehicles of any sort can hopefully take us up on these rebates and transition to zero emission vehicles. We provide up to $5,000 per vehicle from TAM, and then matching with the CVRP that provides up to $10,000 per vehicle. This one is really a difficult program because the total cost of ownership for EVs, as we all probably know, is substantially lower than an internal combustion engine. And we've really seen the comparison between cost of the first 3 years of these vehicles drop substantially in recent years. So the funding doesn't really seem to move the needle very much, but it does provide an incentive in the sort of way to encourage folks to really move vehicles out of their current fleets sooner than they probably would otherwise. Within these programs, we offer pilot provisions. We have done zero emission buses with partnership with Marin Transit. We work with the county on a solar charging pilot at their courtyard to reduce the need for trenching of conduit for charging stations. And then we did a really interesting process in 2022 to solicit concepts from public agencies in the county on what they were interested in and try and assess what the need is in this market, because it's been rapidly shifting over the last couple of years. And that process went so well, MTC, our regional partners, actually mimicked that process and conducted their own project concept solicitation to help them guide their future program development. So overall, we've helped deliver, sorry, this slide might be slightly out of date, 411 chargers, not the 422. We've have 411 chargers either in rebate or have been delivered in the county, which is really high for a county of our size. As I mentioned, the public agency rebates just from local funding sources are incredibly high. And most of our agencies aren't even bothering to go after Air District or other funding sources that are available to them. Our program works where it's 2 to 20 heads and up to $3,000 per head. And that's really to align ourselves with MCE's program structure and make it really easy on applicants. And we constantly get or kudos from our partner agencies that our programs are amongst the easiest grant applications or rebate applications to apply for. And we, like I said, have that pilot program support, and we encourage people to consider pilot projects and request funding for sort of unique circumstances that may be necessary to make projects get over the finish line. Over to our fleet rebate program, I talked a little bit about this. Up to $5,000 per vehicle for public agencies. We also allow for vehicle leasing to allow public agency fleets to right size their fleets. There's often, as sort of equipment and needs transition, the replacement of fleets can be a little bit problematic under an ownership model. And so we're seeing some agencies transition to vehicle leasing models for their fleet. And that actually is really helpful for them to make sure their vehicles are newer and cleaner emission vehicles. But we also include used vehicles, e-bikes, which I know Corte Madera has taken us up on the purchase of e-bikes for their town staff. And we do see limited uptick, mostly related to the lower cost of ownership already required by EVs. The funding, like I said, doesn't really seem to move the needle too much. And then a lot of our fleet vehicles are mission critical. They're police vehicles or off-road or maintenance type vehicles that there isn't really a zero emission vehicle replacement eligible for those types of vehicles. We try and work with our public works directors to test out and pilot new projects, and so we have that pilot provision here as well. We've also funded, and we're on the subcommittee developing the countywide EV acceleration strategy along with Corte Madera staff. So kudos to Phil Boyle and the community development department for his participation in this process as well. And just wanted to note that EVIP Pro, this is a resource that was available a couple of years ago that is no longer that really highlighted the need here of what our EV charging looks like in the county. And the need is mostly around shared private chargers. That's the projected need. And those are workplace and multi-unit family chargers typically. So that's where the MCE rebate is focused. And we encourage workplaces and multi-unit family properties to apply for MCE or Air District rebates as appropriate. The public need is still there, and that's typically being covered more and more by commercial and retail spaces, which were identified in the letter from this commission or committee. And so I want to talk further about commercial and retail land uses and how to support charges in that space. This report has strategies organized by the following areas. I'm not going to read them all, but it's intended really to provide a menu of options to local jurisdictions. They've identified electrification of transportation as a key issue in their local climate action plans for transportation. And so we're trying to make sure that we can support our local jurisdictions in carrying out their climate action plans as appropriate.
Can you go back? What is shared private? Did I miss that? What's shared private?
Shared private chargers are basically chargers on private property that are open to the public, but they are on private property. So they're not like it's not a public parking. Shopping centers is a good example of that. Workplaces, multi-unit families.
Thank you.
General trends and next steps. Kind of wanted to talk about what we're seeing in some of the general trends. And over the last 3 years, we've really seen a growth in what we call fast charging installations in the county. And there's been an emergent model here that has really driven this acceleration. The model is as such, there's vendors out there, there's Volta, there's EVgo, various companies, and they actually approach property owners and request leasing of their parking lots to install EV chargers. That generates revenues for the property owners, and those costs often get passed on through the cost of electricity using the chargers. And this model has been successful and is really driving the installation of DC fast chargers at the moment. Of course, that's subject to change in the future as business conditions change. But really why we've been focused on this is we've noticed over the last couple of years that local permitting processes may limit revenue sources for charging companies. We've seen challenges with conditional use permits at local jurisdictions, limiting the clear intention by state legislation to install electric vehicle chargers without public subsidy, because ultimately we don't want to infringe on or step into a market where there's already private funding going towards these types of resources. Another thing that we've seen, and I think this is applicable to Corte Madera, is the volume and the signage regulations within cities can limit potential revenue sources, secondary revenue sources that reduce the cost to pass on to EV owners. And that may include things like television screens at EV chargers or just audio equipment to play commercials. And that's totally within a city's prerogative, but we want to make sure that we are using the private market and supporting private market in this space and not requiring the use of local transportation tax dollars within sort of supporting commercial or retail uses. So we typically encourage any commercial or retail uses to apply for MCE's rebates or the air district rebates where they're both eligible, and the TAM funding is strictly set aside for public agencies and opportunities at community centers, libraries, things of that nature. The other general trend I want to talk about is a third of the new vehicle sales in the county are zero emission vehicles. This has been pretty rapidly shifting, and the growth that we've been expecting and talking about for years in zero emission vehicles is here. That means outreach and the need for outreach is shifting really rapidly at the moment. OEMs are really stepping into this space. We're finally seeing commercials, for example, for new vehicles that are zero emission vehicles, where I can't recall if I ever saw a Chevy Bolt commercial while those are made. And so what's happening in this space is, as OEMs and dealers are stepping into the outreach space, the outreach needs to shift to the targeted populations that are being left behind that aren't early adopters. And the outreach needs to basically sort of address the either market that's not being tackled by manufacturers or the market that is identify needs to reaching their target audiences. And that's been different than the past, where we sort of just had general consumer outreach. And that's likely to occur as more and more vehicles come to market over the next couple of years as well. Multi-unit family housing needs also continue to remain a very important topic in this space. Up until recently with the RENA allocation process, retrofitting and modifying existing housing stock for electric vehicle charging has been much more challenging than new construction. That's still expected to remain. And that's really the role of the electrical providers and air districts to target that market, because they have the administration capability with working with their ratepayers to reduce cost, and third-party agencies or other government agencies such as TAM don't really have an administrative function in this space. But we are requesting and sort of have some things to think about in terms of actions. We're requesting public agencies to adopt the MCEP EV readiness strategy and identify their key actions. We would like to make sure public agencies identify their top priority projects in their capital improvement programs and make sure that's part of the work plan, and engage funding partners early, which is really a critical step to make sure the projects that are moving forward are financially viable and pencil out for public agencies. Often we're seeing the funding agency partners being brought in once a project is fully designed, and the opportunity to maximize rebates or installations are limited at that point. And so early engagement with funding partners really needs to be the project concepts are being identified. The chart here is really interesting. It's we haven't updated it in a couple months now, but what it's showing is that back in 2018, we had a couple of electric vehicle chargers, DC fast chargers installed by the private market within the county. There's 10, and now we're up to 122 within a very short time frame. So we're hopeful that this trend grows. I'm a little bit worried that supply chain issues during the pandemic are going to taper this growth curve off. But the idea here is that the private market really is addressing DC fast charging, and we're expecting that trend to continue as Electrify America and some of these companies are moving forward with their installations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I just sort of wanted to give a background, and I know we've got another agenda item related to the committee's letter. So I'm happy to sort of talk about some strategies to think about in that letter, but maybe let's start with Q&A first.
I have a quick question. How does permitting for signage, local permitting affect revenue sources for the vendor?
Some EV vendors use advertisement at EV charging stations to reduce, to generate a revenue stream that gets passed on instead of the EV charging cost. And so as we think about signage rules in our jurisdictions, there's obviously limitations of what's acceptable from a quality of life perspective, but that may actually rule out some vendors from moving forward with installations as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
What are the limits on the grid capacity for facilitating large projects? Has that been a difficult interface between the grid and the charging station?
Yeah, that has come up on a couple of projects. San Rafael City Schools, for example, in the County of Marin installations, as they move forward, just given the size of the charging needs at those spaces, they require early consultation with PG&E. PG&E actually has public agency focused programs where public agencies that are converting their fleet to medium and heavy duty vehicles, they can actually sign up for the PG&E program, get a discount on the vehicles and on the chargers, and PG&E will actually pay for the grid updates at those locations. There are eligibility requirements for that, but what they're really trying to do is just make sure that PG&E is engaged early in the process, and it could be worked into their existing workload. That's actually been a bigger problem and is going to grow in terms of, grid. I don't want to say availability of power, but the distribution system of that power is particularly challenged at some sites. And so their early consultation with PG&E when you're thinking about, medium and heavy duty fleet conversion or 50+ charger installations is sort of a key topic.
A follow-up question to that. Given that we need a significant amount of new energy for charging, is TAM involved at all in doing parking lot solar panels or battery storage with that to support the installation of more EV chargers?
TAM typically only engages with projects that have, our funding is reserved from a policy perspective from the panel forward, so to the charger, to the vehicle. Grid supply issues and power supply issues are typically addressed by MCE or PG&E, or those that have a sort of role and relationship with the grid itself. It's less of a mobility issue at that point, and so we work with MCE and PG&E to support those types of projects from a technical assistance perspective, but we don't necessarily have a role in funding those types of projects. We make sure that those costs are eligible for our rebate. So anybody doing a big solar project can include the cost of the solars within, like, the solar panels within the rebate calculation. But ultimately, we're focused on installation of the chargers and the fleet vehicles.
There is that collaborative relationship with the utilities, electricity providers, so that, for instance, canopy, solar over a parking area that feeds directly to the chargers and augments that electrical load, is something that you are at least working with your partners on, or is that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would say the great example of this is we just got we were in discussions with TAM Union about the installation of 42 chargers at their school sites. And this came out of a news story actually in the IJ where they're moving forward with solar canopies and redesigning their parking lots and doing a bunch of make-ready infrastructure. So typically the way that works is a contractor is brought on board to help with the electrical design. And then as they get into that process, we're working with them to sort of maximize the EV charging installation to right-size the financial rebates with the process. So we encourage those types of projects to move forward. And we, when there's the opportunity to go and install the chargers, that's where we try and work with them early in the process so they can maximize the financial rebates where they're available at the charger to help offset the cost of the solar panels.
Thank you.
Most of my questions related to Corte Madera proper. So I really appreciate the context for the county that I was looking forward to talking about for Corte Madera. Is that where you're going to segue into? So
Yeah, I was happy to answer any questions, or there's a letter that was provided to this committee. I didn't write the letter, so I probably shouldn't be the one to lead that conversation, but I'm happy to be responsive to any questions. And maybe some context about how that letter came about and how we can help would be helpful.
I think the letter correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but the letter came about, we were just following up on the climate action plan and suggestion to maybe it came from some work tasks from Phoebe, but identifying in our community where we thought that this body thought that chargers could or should be. And I was in on that discussion, but I think we were looking for ubiquity. And that if you go to a public parking lot where kids are playing soccer, or that there's an opportunity to have a vehicle charger there. And then in listening to you now, I would add to that, Corte Madera benefits when more people buy EVs in Corte Madera. We've got a lot of places to buy an EV now in Corte Madera. And this vision of being a charger friendly town, an EV friendly town, and a town that gets tax revenue when we buy more EVs in our town. So we just want to accelerate this body, I think, speaking for the body, we want to accelerate decarbonization of mobility and have it be an aspect in our community that we're well known for, and it's just part of our lifestyle. Did I get that right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's where we want to go. We just want chargers everywhere. So like one of my questions for you was like, a lot of the sites that we looked at, I imagine there's going to be pressure to not take up too many parking spaces or not create too many new parking spaces where we can be. Do you have a sense of the cost for some of these places that have ready access to an electrical connection, but there needs to be some grounding and some installation costs and some signage? And what is a round number for an installation cost as compared to the rebates that you were describing that are available?
Yeah, I can talk about public agency costs because I'm much more familiar with those, but they're probably pretty applicable to sort of any general parking lot. And hopefully private companies can be a little bit more efficient than government agencies. But what we see when there's make-ready infrastructure, or it's a pretty limited job of just installing pedestals, the cost per port is about $6,000. So when you look at our rebate levels, like we're exceeding what the typical cost of installations are. Now, that being said, conditions vary, right? If you have to do a significant amount of trenching and undergrounding of the electrical equipment, those costs can easily start going up. And so And with remodels where you may have to replace a panel, those costs go up even higher. And so that's really where, you know, agencies like TAM and MCE can play a role earlier in the process. Is if you're starting to go down a process where you have to, you know, redo the interior equipment room of a facility or a panel upgrade, you know, maximizing the charger installations at that point, that's sort of one of the tactics to help offset those costs. So in relationship to a number of these locations that you identified, the shopping centers are a great location and a great place to start. I actually, we've seen a couple models emerge of citizen groups approaching shopping centers, identifying the property manager, and reaching out to a couple vendors to sort of make that connection happen. And those have had mixed success, but I think it's a good model to sort of potentially emulate. If there's a couple vendors that, you know, you're familiar with or are interested in these locations, you can reach out to them via their general business line and set up a meeting with property owners should they be willing. It's a little bit challenging for town staff to do that sometimes because of the regulatory and land use authority of a jurisdiction. And so when citizen groups do that, that seems to be a little bit easier of an in to some of the property managers. And maybe there's some assistance that town staff can do with identifying the proper contacts at those locations, or, you know, potential vendors to consider. The locations you identified, Nugget Market, the Corte Madera Town Center, Park Madera Center, I think these are all viable locations. They're all close to the highway, which is sort of a chief aspect for a lot of these vendors. They all have their own business model and areas they're targeting. Some work with, you know, specific like property management companies or property owners or businesses, but not all of them do that. And so there's a little bit of, you know, finding the right vendor and the right property manager, but ultimately that relationship is what drives the installation of these chargers. And like I said, all those, if they're workplaces, they may be eligible for MCE rebates. If they're a large enough charging installation, they may be eligible for the air district rebates. And the same thing goes for office complexes. This isn't a role that TAM necessarily addresses very often, unless it's like county offices or, you know, an office related to a public agency. But these locations identified in this letter, they're all great and they're all eligible for MCE rebates. And so if town staff can, you know, shoot out, you know, email notices or provide information about MCE rebates to a targeted audience, that might be an effective marketing strategy to see which commercial, you know, office complexes are interested or even thinking about it. We know from our discussions, like we just were on Marin County Office of Education meeting last week, that employees are asking for chargers frequently. And there is a growing demand at a lot of places for charging equipment. And so, you know, it's just providing the information to those who are willing to consider it and move forward with it. And I think that's probably step one with office complexes. The recommendations for public installations, park, schools, and town property. You know, this has been something that your DPW director has been looking at, and you know, we'd be happy to continue to work with the DPW on supporting these installations at these locations. It really just comes down to the right sizing, right? Like if it's a $70,000 project to install 2 charge ports at a location, then you're only getting $6,000 from TAM, maybe $12,000 or $13,000 in general. And that's not really a cost-effective project to be moving forward. And so that's kind of where your DPW can help balance the conversation is, you know, we don't necessarily need chargers everywhere. We definitely don't want to install chargers where they're not sort of cost-effective solutions. But maybe that's a location for, you know, a level 1 charger, which can charge e-bikes or bike lockers or some other, you know, e-mobility solution that like can still address the transportation needs and clean transportation needs, but without the significant capital cost of, you know, a limited charger installation with a significant amount of trenching.
You just put a lot out there.
Yeah.
Are we backing up to where you started, I think is, maybe are we a town representative or are we a citizen body?
That's a good question. You're kind of both. You're a citizen advisor group for the town. But I don't see why.
Can we send letters as a body to these private and or public entities, making them aware of this opportunity to benefit from rebates? And can we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could work together on a strategy for that. I don't think there's any issue in the town reaching out and providing information about these rebate opportunities.
Just the two data points that Derek shared. The order of magnitude of the rebates and order of magnitude of the cost. Those are great data points to share with some of these people that control these locations.
Yeah, I think that could be a next step, looking at how do we actually reach these property managers and share the information.
And I'm sure our partners over at MCE can have specific tailored information for workplaces too, or their programs that would be helpful. Like I said, because we're focused on public agencies, it's difficult for us to like give you firm costs and things like that. I think just we're ballparking sort of numbers here. But like I said, for the most part, a lot of the charger installations that we're seeing move forward, they're not requesting public agency funds. They're covered by the private market, and you know, where MCE and the air district can step in and sort of fill that gap. We haven't seen funding be a restriction in a long time in this space. It's figuring out who the willing is and how to actually get them to the table. And so I don't know what the structure of this committee is, but when we've seen advocates go those conversations with property owners and identify those property owners, typically they want to be responsive to their community and their constituents. And so I'm sure they're receptive to having these conversations, and especially if there's a revenue generation possibility for property owners, that's a pretty willing or pretty attractive proposition to them often.
So just to kind of restate what you said, is that there's like two action items for this group. One is constructing a letter for office property owners, property managers that would benefit from MCE or PG&E money and getting those together. And then the other one is the public locations. And by public, you're lumping like shopping centers into that, right?
That is-
That's private.
That's private, but there was that category of shared private, yeah. Now, do you fund shared, do you fund the shared private?
No, so that is a really, yeah, we don't, the projections in this space we've seen from nonprofits or from non-government agencies. That was sort of the first time we've seen a government agency, that was the CEC, actually prepare forecasts and projections. So I don't actually like those terms. I like how you guys wrote it in the letter of, and that's what I was referencing, is like you've got the commercial installations at shopping centers as one group, the office complexes as another group, and MCE has office complex rebates, and then you've got public installations at park, schools, and towns property as like a third category. And that's really something your DPW department can assist with and support, sort of like the rough cost estimate for those chargers and like, or for an installation there, and sort of how to maximize the rebates to help offset those costs. But the first two categories, we've seen a lot of success when it's citizens or members of the community approaching property owners in that space. So that might be something this committee wants to consider.
But it would be up to the property owner to find out a ballpark cost to hook up to the power grid and get it to the panel, which is gonna be the lion's share of the cost, obviously, not the charging station itself.
Actually, the cost is typically borne by the vendor on that type of information, provided they have an agreement to move forward with installation. So the vendors typically do their due diligence in identifying whether or not they're interested in installing at those sites, and the property owner's not heavily engaged in sort of that site work necessarily, but providing access to vendors to make those understand what that cost is.
Right.
So if property owners are willing to consider this and willing to work with vendors to move forward with an installation, it's not necessarily a cost of the project property manager. It's a cost to the vendor that will then install and provide EV charging for the customers there.
Well, who are the vendors that you think want to be in Corte Madera?
You know, that's a great question. We get phone calls pretty regularly. We've seen a lot of various vendors come and go. And I would be happy to provide you a list of vendors that we've been having communications with over the last 2 years. There's Volta, there's Electrify America, there's EVgo, there's a whole host of companies that emerge. But yeah, let me follow up with Phoebe on list of potential vendors there. Most of them have websites. You can reach out and find a business development representative pretty easily. And the business development team will do a lot of the legwork to see whether or not they're interested in those sites and, if they would like to move forward with projects.
Sort of following on that, the first step is to get in the door. And if that's a letter, there has to be a compelling reason to set up a meeting. And, what we can't do is estimate the cost or the benefit to a property owner, because that falls into the vendor's due diligence based on the site and the load and all of that. So would you suggest that we work with MCE staff to pull out some of those, I don't want to say sales points, but that the pieces that we could use as the hook to set up the meeting to gain enough interest that we could then have a real meeting and give more information that could get them to take that next step to reach out to vendors.
That's a great option to move forward. From my understanding of the space, it may be just as simple as asking the property managers, do your customers request this? Have you noticed what your, percentage of your parking lot, how much of it's an EV at any given time? Whenever we have this conversation with folks that run office complexes, it's a pretty common request of property managers to have EV chargers put in to support their workforce. And I can't imagine it's that different at a shopping center or commercial complex. The thing with the shopping centers that is really going to be a lot of people recognize that as an amenity for their business. And so if there's an interest in providing that amenity, it's usually more of a gut feeling than facts and figures, I feel like. But you got to have that sort of willingness to have the conversation. And I think there's different ways of doing that. And I think your approach is probably the most reasonable from a process standpoint of generate some information from MCE and move forward with that conversation. But if you're shopping at the Nugget and you can ask the general manager if they need EV chargers, you might as well do so. It's
I'll stop on my way home.
Yeah. About 5 minutes after using it.
There we go.
I think I need to put that stuff together.
There's two clear directions. So one is working with MCE. And I bet they have a case study.
Oh, yeah.
And then the second one is working with DPW to get, and then schools was another one. That's not really DPW, that's schools. So that's kind of another category too, right?
Yeah, and schools are a tougher nut to crack, just given like who's responsible for capital improvements and maintenance. So yeah, if there's any, if you have, any superintendents that are interested in moving forward with charging installations or are familiar with, the bonds or measures that are moving forward for facility upgrades, like there's a conversation to be had about how to install chargers at those at that time. Centerville City Schools did 117 charge ports, which is one of our biggest projects. TAM Union's installing 42. They've got capacity for another about 110. And so we think that the school market's great. It taps into employees, teachers that may be driving further distances. It helps students learn about the connection between transportation and climate change. There's the ability to open those up to community during either special events or, if security is something that can be, if that issue can be managed, they could be generally available to community as well. And there have been some examples of that, but it ticks a lot of boxes within Marin County to have chargers at schools. And so, yes, any contacts that this committee has with superintendents or with facilities management, I think those are good places to start and make sure they're aware of the rebate offerings and how to move projects forward. But
So
most
your
of our
rebates- just to make sure I'm understanding, your rebates do apply to school sites. Okay.
Yes, they do.
and MCE, because it's a workplace, typically the rebates apply as well.
Oh. And they
So-
stack them?
Oh yeah,
Different
totally.
Oh,
So really, the projects that we see move forward of significance are like College of Marin. We did 35 chargers at that location. At Kentfield, I think we did some more at Indian Valley campus too, but the number escapes me. If they're doing facility upgrades, that's a huge opportunity for us to tap into construction projects that are underway. It's more difficult to sort of get that retrofit project going off the ground just for a charger installation. But if they're thinking about solar canopies or parking lot upgrades or facility upgrades, piggybacking onto those projects to get chargers installed is just a no-brainer for most agencies.
So there's 3 directions here for this group to work on then, right, Phoebe? No, I'm just organize our efforts, that's all. So there's 3.
I was really emphasizing the action part of this committee's name, so I came prepared.
I'm all about action. That's why we signed up. It's great.
Any more questions for us again?
I don't think so. It just sounds so easy and so like cost shouldn't be a barrier here.
It's all about identifying the coalition of the willing, and
Yep.
that's been the challenge with this space for a while. Is you have to have the right pieces fall into place and empower the individuals. And so, that's where I think the community support and the community advocacy is really helpful. Hopefully that's something that can, drive some projects in Corte Madera too.
It just seems like in our community, we have so many more EVs on the road now than we did just a year ago. It's amazing. I don't have any science behind that. It just seems like there's a lot of EVs on the road. Well, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Really?
feel free to reach out to Michaela or myself with any questions. We're a resource. We're here to help support projects. And also, MC is a great agency to move forward with a lot of charger installations as well and offer technical assistance in spaces beyond what TAM does. So, we're happy to put you in contact with any MC representatives as well.
So just Phoebe, so when we get to the further on in the agenda, we can identify what the action items are and the follow-ups. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Thank
Derek
you.
and Michaela, for coming. and
Thanks
thank
for
you,
your
Derek,
hard
for
work.
the
Keep it up, man.
presentation.
Yeah, great to see you, Derek. And
Good to see you, Leslie. All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
That was cool.
Thanks for arranging that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rebates are 6,000, it costs about 6,000. Easy math.
Depends on the site.
It totally depends, but it's just,
But yeah,
but the spread isn't this.
no, exactly, exactly. Depending on the site, but yeah.
It sounds like one of the things we should do is clarify with the town to what extent we as a committee can engage in that kind of promotion stuff, right? You know, I mean, it'd be great if we could, you know, get together to approach the various shopping centers as a committee saying we, you know, represent the town and the citizens and we're interested in doing this. And then being the liaison between them and the EV charging vendors. I didn't get a sense that there's, you know, is there competition among the vendors such that you can play one off against the other or find out which ones are more focused on different kinds of installations? That would be good stuff to know. So there's a lot of information we need. But I think the first thing we need to do is find out what we're able to do as this committee. You know, obviously we could go off and do stuff on our own as interested citizens, but that would be good to know.
I think we can educate, but we can't be in the position, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can't be an intermediary between private companies. So we can certainly give a list of approved
Right.
vendors who have, you know, a history in Marin. But I don't think we want to take on, you know, being the middleman or woman.
Well, no, yeah, I understand, but having that information and the recent scandals about, you know, chargers not being available for use and they don't work and all that good stuff, and you know, figuring out how to work, and this is part of the education that would need to happen with the property owners and the managers is, you know, what about Tesla's program now? You know, they're expanding their what they're allowed to do. GM and I think Ford are, you know, going to be doing different, you know, and the last thing that you want to do is present a whole new can of worms to a property manager on what they need to figure out, right?
Well,
So
we're talking about a lot of different installations that have different issues around them. So can we just create action items now? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, so I think we're moving on to item 4B.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just take, so the public locations. That the discussion with Department of Public Works, according to Derek, that's an easy one.
right.
Yeah, so that is something, as Derek mentioned, Public Works has already done some thinking about that, and the locations that they were looking at align pretty well with what this committee recommended as well. And so the next steps there are for staff to go back and evaluate those locations further, and select sites that we think we want to move forward with some additional evaluation, and develop a plan for how to do that, how to fund it, and then get it on the work plan for next year, and make sure if the rebates aren't going to cover the cost, where the additional funding is going to come from.
Can we look at historic projects that have been done historically by municipalities that have a cost associated with them? In other words, they put it out to bid, they got estimates. This was the situation that they were dealing with. It was
I
X
think we
amount of
can ask
years.
staff to do that.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be pretty difficult to generalize, just because where the panel is, where the chargers are gonna go.
right, that's what I'm saying. If we went to several different places that did this in different ways, then at least we could get an idea of what we're talking about. for
Yeah.
cost.
And I think our DPW can come up with those estimates once we do a more detailed analysis of the sites.
Is there anything that you need from us to accelerate the discussion with DPW or to get it going faster?
I think this is already something that they're thinking about, so it's just a matter
Is it
of
on
how-
their work plan?
Not for this year, but I think for next year, it could be.
So you could earmark that as something we're highly interested in for next year, I guess,
Yeah.
somehow. And then it's gonna be.
Are libraries included? That, I thought that wasn't really on the
No,
list,
it is-
and
it is, yes,
Corte Madera's library is part of the Marin County system,
but the property's town property.
is it?
I'm pretty certain from my time on the planning commission.
Okay, because that makes it sort of an interesting, we could probably talk to MC, the county free library and county
I think they're kind of
sustainability.
like operators and it's town property.
Right, but there might be a way to, because that seems like a logical place that we maybe didn't have on our
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, Phoebe, if you could add that to the wish list.
Yeah,
locations,
I'll look into that.
Public
And
libraries.
do we really have to wait until next year? I
I
know you were thinking.
Did you hear me say
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm probably not gonna
Yeah.
have more time to focus on this until later this year, and then
Yeah.
I know DPW has a lot of projects on their list for this year as well, so I think next year is more
No,
realistic.
just a kind of a note, in San Francisco, they're installing, as they are in other cities, chargers curbside
Yeah,
on public streets.
oh, yeah,
It's pretty amazing.
it is, and that's all
And
that
if
they
you
do.
think about that, it's like, there's other opportunities for us in Madera. It doesn't have to be a
Right,
parking. It
right,
can be a parking space on a public street.
right, and using
Yeah.
the electrical poles, which we have everywhere, and street, I mean, there is electricity flowing there, that's how it's done in Europe and other places as well.
Yes, maybe we just kind of add that to the thinking.
Yeah.
That there doesn't have to be a parking lot. It could be where it's
Yeah.
needed and convenient in other ways.
And, just on the information gathering side, besides TAM, MC, and the county, Drive Clean Bay Area, located right here in Marin, Colleen Cullen's group, has a wealth of information on details. So they would be a really good resource for our own education and for perhaps including potential letter to property owners as well.
Going back to the street side, if you look at the town park, not town park, the town square.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be in the parking lot. It can be on one of the street spots. Thinking out
But
loud.
there's no telephone poles there.
There's no
Well,
telephone?
the electrical poles, yeah, I mean, you've got wires going everywhere, so where there are wires. And a street lamp, for instance, is another, but you've got wires and you've got electrical things along the road.
Yeah.
There's that opportunity.
I just reread the book by John Hale,
Mhm.
History of the Town of Corte Madera.
Mhm.
What a great read. That was fun.
But think
You
about
can borrow mine if you don't have
two copies, I have the draft and I.
it.
But yeah, I mean, just to follow along, we have a few restaurants in town, mostly around Old Town Park. That people are gonna be there for a couple of hours, you would think, having dinner. So it's not like running into the grocery store and being out in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's where people might be staying a little bit longer, so it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
a fast charge, or it can be something, it doesn't have to be level one.
So that's public, that's easy.
Yeah.
I think we did that. And then there's schools.
Yeah.
So that's a letter to schools.
Right,
And that's something we can write in
Yeah.
the town. And so Phoebe, that's an action for schools. And that's for us, not for you, but for us. And maybe it's on a policy committee to do it.
Mm,
And then there's, then the next one was commercial properties.
right,
And the next one was, multifamily projects.
yeah, commercial retail separate, and then the multifamily piece is really a challenge, as we experienced. a member of staff who lives in a multifamily co-op, not co-op, but
HOA.
an HOA, right, with lots of buildings and different parking spots. The parking spot that is assigned to them and where the meter is long ways away. So it's just, there's huge challenges there.
Does it have a visitor spot?
There are potential solutions, but it's
Yeah.
like thinking through, even though you really want to do something, there are hurdles that everyone's really needs help with. And so that's probably the multifamily. I mean, this is being looked at everywhere. as
Could
you
the
probably know.
curbside be the way to do it? That could it be a city-owned curbside location that's near a multifamily property?
If that, yeah, I mean, if that exists, if there's that confluence, yeah. That would be something to look into.
Like, so for the multifamily projects and the office projects, maybe town can help out with the mailing list. So where I thought this could go, Phoebe, except for the Department of Public Works. The other ones, we can write a letter, have you guys review and kind of sanction the letter. And then can we use town resources to get that letter out to the right people?
Yeah, I would need to check on what the best way is to do that, but I'm sure there's a way we can get that information out. And it would be helpful to have, this committee work on drafting or putting together resources.
I'll volunteer to help with these letters, and maybe the policy committee can help a little bit too. Sure. Yeah.
Do you think we should start with the easiest, which is the public, that would be schools and perhaps the library and supporting what the town is wanting to do, and then taking that next step, get our feet wet at that first one, and then move on to commercial retail.
All of this in one meeting.
Sure, we can.
It's not that hard.
No, it's not that hard.
Super talented people in it.
We do.
Okay. That's cool. This idea about the town being, so like chargers being just ubiquitous, that you see in
Yeah.
all over the place. I think that's really cool. And then we can sell more EVs and get more tax revenue. I'll be happier.
We want that.
Yeah. You want to go to updates from reports or,
There was one other thing I wanted to mention on this item, which Derek also brought up, was the countywide EV acceleration strategy. And that was another action that was identified on our climate action work plan for this year, was to go through that strategy and identify other actions that the town wants to pursue besides what we've been talking about, which is installing more EV charging stations. Also, I think curbside charging was one of the strategies in that document as well to pursue.
smart people? Yeah.
Yes.
What charging is there?
So it's the Marin countywide EV acceleration strategy.
Yeah.
That was developed by MCEP. So I wanted to see if there was interest with this group in having a look through that document and
Yes,
identifying. some
absolutely.
strategies. Okay.
I vote yes. Anytime.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, so I'll send that out to you all after the meeting.
I did have a town vehicle go past my driveway the other day and it was not making any combustion noises. And it was one of the new EVs.
One of the Volkswagens.
Yeah, it was a Volkswagen.
Yeah.
So cool. Shiny white car.
Yep.
Yeah, so cool. Should we move on to 5? Or I think we're kind of there.
Yeah, sure. So staff updates. Dave and I met a week or so ago to talk about communicating the town's climate progress. So I'm working on a list of sort of talking points for the committee at 4th of July and other events, just to highlight the progress that we have made. And so that you have that ready, and then also that'll be part of the update to our webpage, the town climate actions, a more complete picture of what we have done so far. And so that'll be up on the climate and sustainability
Yeah,
portion
thanks
of the
for doing that.
website.
We had a great conversation. It's just like, can we not have it be so dour all the time, just about climate change? You know, and can we actually share the good things that town has done,
Mhm.
progress we are doing?
Walking our talk.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for following up on that.
Yeah. And then, quick update on the 4th of July. I don't know, Martin, you want to comment on this as well, but Martin, Amy and I have been working on getting ready for the booth that we're gonna have. So wanted to check in on volunteers. We're looking at running pretty much all day, set up at 9 and take down around 4:30 or 5. So Amy and I are gonna be there for setup. But we need a additional volunteer or two from around 9 to 11. And then around 2 or 3 to 5. So is anyone interested and available?
Yeah,
for either of those
yeah,
times?
100%.
Any time slot preferences?
I'll take, because of another commitment I have, I'd like the later shift, and I could help with tear down.
Okay, great.
Hopefully not the only person left standing.
Okay, I'll go too. Put me in wherever you need, in multiple slots as well. I'm happy to be there. for-
I'd like the morning, but I
Okay.
don't know why.
Someone bring this man coffee. Yeah, just let me know when you need me. I'm happy to work however many hours are needed. I set the day aside for that.
Okay, that's
Should be
great.
fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
9 to 4:30.
The full block, yeah.
Right, yeah, so we're hoping to have one table with our flyers and the checklist that the engagement subcommittee's been working on, and then one table with some activities, so possibly like coloring, maybe decorating produce bags, and then a third table with the spinny wheel and where people can answer questions and win a prize. So it would be great to have at least 2 or 3 people there all day to man.
Yeah, you need if you could- three big tables, I mean, are these card tables or 6 feet long or?
For 6-foot tables.
All
Are
right.
there any high school students that would want to step in?
I was going to share, I've been meeting with Redwood and Camps Climate Clubs, and a lot of people are out of town during that weekend.
Sure.
Right.
But I'm hoping to get some people, maybe high schoolers.
A couple.
Yeah, I think I can get, I'm really hoping people are gonna be.
Great.
Okay, awesome.
And
And
then
then,
it's the table, I'm just thinking out loud, it's the table and that event, a time to let people know that there are gonna be seats available coming up on the,
Oh, yeah.
on the committee.
well, there aren't any more, those seats were filled.
Oh, they were filled.
Yes, so this is the last meeting with this current committee, and then starting July, we'll have 2 new committee members. So one
Do
is,
you get to know who they are?
yes, it was, let's see if I can pull up their names. They were, interviewed by the town council, so it's public.
I missed the email.
I did too.
Karen Lang, I believe, and Pat Burtis are the 2 new committee.
So we'll be bringing them in July.
They might not both be able to make the July meeting. I'm still waiting on some confirmation there. So their terms will officially start in July, but they may not attend their first meeting until August potentially.
When were they interviewed? What was the date of the council meeting? Do you remember?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can let you know. Yeah. Yeah, so the next committee member recruitment won't be until next spring. And that's when,
Okay, and then, no need to bring that up from the 4th through 5.
and then final update is that we're going to be having a discussion about the REACH codes with the planning commission on July 11th. So it's been shifted back a little bit.
But what do you mean when you say we?
Staff will
Staff.
be taking an item, a discussion item about the renovation beach codes that have been discussed at this committee to the planning commission on July 11th.
Right? People can bring their pitchforks. You know, Martin, I really appreciate the wisdom that you brought to our discussion on that, you know, that mobile, domestic hot water and air conditioning and transportation are such areas to focus compared to the stove.
Absolutely.
For
Yeah.
example, yeah. And the
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah.
Good, good. I appreciate that.
That wisdom has just been ringing in my head since you made that point so well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this charging infrastructure for Corte Madera. I mean, this has got to be something that's we deal with. And I'm wondering to what extent we could, as a committee, offer our services for information gathering to folks like managers of public of shopping centers and so on, and also to, you know, the libraries and schools. Can we offer ourselves as a resource to help them look stuff up? I mean, and just because we're supposed to be knowledgeable about some of this stuff.
I think we can.
I mean, I'd be happy to help almost anybody look into stuff they need to know to do this. You know, and we don't have an axe. We're not trying to sell anything, so we're just trying to make it happen, right?
Yeah, I think I was just kind of thinking, I think that Mace Rich and the public libraries, this is probably on their radar. They probably think about this all the time, and getting a letter from this body, just maybe it nudges them a little bit further, you know, makes it move a little bit higher on their due list.
Yeah.
But we aren't gonna, Mace Rich knows about this already. You know, we aren't gonna, and I think that the location that of the Macy's chargers are there because Macy's is a separate property than the Mace Rich holding. And I just,
It's true.
yeah, and so I suspect that Macy's had a national contract with that particular vendor that had those obnoxious signs that talked.
Well,
When you
gas stations have them too, you know, so.
Yeah, and they've got to earn their money, but it was
Yeah.
obnoxious. It was obnoxious when you walk by the sign and it started to talk to you about whatever they were advertising. And it's third party advertising. It didn't even have anything to do with the charging.
Right. It's just, yeah, Cheerios, whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Or Exxon.
Right. Has enough, you know, we had this, remember early on in our committee meetings, we were talking with Eli about the snafu with the town center folks. You remember that, where
Yeah.
they got slapped down because of they couldn't have signage or whatever the heck it was. Has enough water gone under the bridge for us to like repair that situation?
It's worth a shot.
That's our job.
Yeah, I think so.
We're the pushers now,
Nudgers.
nudgers.
Nudgers, right. So that would be interesting if we could follow that up. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try to move us along. So that's it for staff?
Yeah, well, just quickly, I did find it was the May 16th council meeting where those interviews were held. And I should have also mentioned that Phil was reappointed for another term.
Hey.
Yay.
It's our man. Anything else for staff? Anything else from committee members as individuals? You want to bring up?
I think it's been recommended that we discuss this first in the policy subcommittee.
Well, but you can bring it up as an individual.
We can come back to it.
Okay, we'll
We
come
can
back to it.
to
Okay.
it, yeah, that's fine. So,
We didn't meet as, Martin, did your ad hoc subcommittee meeting? Were there any other subcommittee report outs?
No, I have none other than what Phoebe discussed already about the July 4th planning. That's it.
Okay. Policy didn't have anything to add. That's it for item 5. So in future agenda items that we want to agendize now. Agendize never comes up as a word in my spell checker, but I use it in my vocabulary.
From the staff side, at the next meeting, we're planning on having the reach codes for your consideration of recommendation council.
Great. So we'll be taking a vote on that or some
Yeah.
consensus, something.
so what phase is that document in at this point? My question really goes to, will we see it? What we're going to be approving or not, or voting on 3 days before, or is it already pretty much formed and we can look it up and find it and peruse it now?
It's not available now. The goal is to have a draft for the planning commission meeting on July 11th.
Okay,
So we should be able to see the draft ordinance at that point.
okay.
Any other updates, reports that I'm missing? No? Okay. And we did, I'm sorry, we did future agenda items. Anything else to add?
Well,
And this is really your last meeting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here, though. Somehow we have to continue to have that outreach to students, high schools, yeah. Yeah, no, please do that. Please do that and accept our gratitude for you being part of this whole process the last couple of years. But yeah, your advice on how best to approach and keep those contacts alive would be really helpful, since I don't think you brought a replacement with you. So that'd be great.
I would just add to that, you stepped up when we weren't even an official committee yet.
Yeah.
A working group.
We were
Yes,
working
we were just the
group,
working
and you
group,
just
yeah.
stepped up, and then one of the aspects about this committee that I'm most proud of, that I share with people, is your participation
Yeah.
as a student and bringing it into the school a little bit. And I echo what Leslie says, that hopefully we can do that more.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it can't happen that way. And I really appreciate everything you did, you gave. And I know you weren't here all the time, and you had other commitments and school stuff that you were working on.
Like getting to GW.
Like, good on you. Yeah. So thank you so much.
It's been really wonderful. Ever since what, 2020?
Yeah, it's been, since right before,
January.
right before it all hit. I expect that while you're in Washington DC, you will be tuning in to our meetings, right?
I will. Honestly, I mean, that's the timing.
So we can
It'll be in the middle of the day.
You got nothing else to do at 7:30 at night, so.
Well, we will miss you and we wish you the very, very best. I'm sorry.
Indeed.
I would have brought you flowers or something.
Thank you.
A street map of DC.
Okay. With that, we'll adjourn meeting. Thank you.